We all have them. Habits. Those things we just do on autopilot, right? But what happens when that autopilot goes horribly wrong? That's what we're going to dig into. That razor-thin line between just doing something unconsciously and making a real choice. And, more importantly, what that means for who's responsible. So really, it all comes down to this one single question. Are we responsible for the things we do out of habit? I mean, it sounds simple, doesn't it? But the answer? Well, the answer is so incredibly complex that it can literally change someone's entire life. We're talking about court cases being won or lost based on this very idea. To really get our heads around this, we're going to look at just two really different stories about people who completely lost control. Both of them were trapped by a habit, a really destructive one, but where they ended up? Totally different places. And right there, in that gap between their stories, that's where we're going to find our answer. All right, first up, let's talk about Brian Thomas, and this is a truly tragic story. It's a case where a habit, something deeply ingrained, led to something unthinkable. And the craziest part, it all happened while he was completely 100% unconscious. So, Brian Thomas, from everything anyone has ever said, was a good man, a kind husband who absolutely adored his wife, Christine. They were childhood sweethearts, but Brian had this thing he dealt with his whole life, a really severe sleep disorder, parasomnia, which meant he suffered from sleepwalking and these awful night terrors. And then, one night, they were on vacation, and Brian had one of his night terrors, a really horrific one. He dreamt that an intruder was in their camper van attacking Christine. So, in his sleep, running on nothing but pure primal survival instinct, he fought back. He fought to protect her. Only he woke up to a reality that is just unimaginable. He had killed his wife. When the police showed up, he was just broken. All he could say was, "She's my world." So you have to ask, what on earth was going on inside his brain? Well, neurologists broke it down. During a sleep terror like that, the thinking part of your brain, the part that makes rational decisions, your frontal lobes, it's just off, completely shut down. Brian wasn't choosing anything. He was basically a machine running on pure instinct, a fight or flight response that he had zero control over. Absolutely none. And because of that medical reality, the court made a pretty huge decision. Brian was acquitted. The verdict couldn't have been clearer. He was not responsible. Why? Because he didn't consciously choose to do it. The whole awful thing was driven by something happening way, way outside of his awareness. Okay, now hold on to Brian's story because we're going to contrast it with a totally different case. Let's talk about Angie Bachman. Her habit also spiraled into a complete disaster. But there was one crucial difference. So Angie Bachman, she started going to casinos, just as a little escape. It made her feel important, special. But then, after a really tough family tragedy, that little weekly escape, it twisted into something much darker, a powerful addiction. She started gambling just to feel numb. And from there, the habit just took over. It escalated and escalated until she'd lost, everything. She filed for bankruptcy, she lost $1 million inheritance, she even lost her home.
And get this, there's a fascinating bit of brain science that was pouring gasoline on this fire. It's something researchers call the near-miss effect in problem gamblers. You know when the slot machine almost lines up? Well, for a problem gambler, their brain lights up with the exact same excitement, the same intense craving, as if they'd actually won the jackpot. It's this neurological trick that makes it almost impossible to just get up and walk away.
But wait, it gets even more complicated. There was another layer here, the casino. They knew. They were tracking her every move, every bet, every loss, and they used all that data against her. They would send her these targeted offers, free trips, gambling money, right at the times they knew she'd be at her weakest. They were deliberately, strategically feeding her addiction. So eventually the casino sued her for all the money she owed. And her argument was, "I couldn't help it. It's an uncontrollable habit." But the court, they didn't see it that way. The verdict came down, she was responsible for her debts. And the reason why, and this is the absolute key to everything we're talking about, is that unlike Brian Thomas, Angie was aware. She knew she had a problem. She knew what she was doing was destructive. And with that awareness comes responsibility. And right there,
In the space between those two really tragic stories, that's where we find the answer. The dividing line, the thing that separates a habit you're responsible for from one you aren't, it's one simple, powerful idea: awareness.
I mean, look at them side by side. The difference is just, it's so stark. Brian, totally unconscious. No awareness, which means no real choice. And the outcome? Not responsible. But Angie was painfully aware of her problem. And even deep in her addiction, that awareness meant that every time she went back to that casino, there was some element of choice involved. The outcome, she was held responsible.
So, here's the bottom line. This is the big takeaway. Responsibility kicks in the moment you become aware of a habit. Once you can see it, you're on the hook for what happens next. But if a habit is operating completely in the dark, totally outside your conscious mind, like Brian's was, well, that's a whole different ballgame.
And look, this isn't just some interesting thought experiment about court cases. This is about us. It's about our own lives. Because the second we become aware of our own habits, the good ones and the bad ones, that's the moment we gain not just the power, but also the responsibility to do something about them.
So, okay, how do you actually do this? Think of it like a path with 3 steps. Step 1 is always awareness. That is the key. You got to see the habit for what it is. But just seeing it, that's not enough. That brings us to step 2. You now have a duty to change. That awareness gives you a responsibility to act. And finally, and this one is so important, you need the power of belief. Real lasting change isn't just about gritting your teeth and trying. It's about genuinely believing that you can change, that you have the power to redraw your own map. There's this fantastic metaphor that really helps picture this. Think of a habit like water flowing downhill. Over years, it carves out a deep path, a channel in the ground. And naturally, the water is always going to want to flow down that same old path. But you, your conscious mind, you have the power to reach down into that stream, build a little dam, and start digging a brand new channel, redirecting that water wherever you want it to go.
So, let's wrap this up. I want to leave you with a question to chew on. Think about your own life, your daily routines, all those things you do on autopilot. Now that you know that awareness is the key, which one of your habits is just waiting for you to reach down and carve it a brand new path?